By the time most people in Gillespie County were hitting snooze for the first time, Wade Sutton was already on his second cup of coffee, boot soles gritty with caliche dust, and deciding whether the day belonged to diesel or barbed wire. If he was on a haul week, he moved in miles. Pre-trip checks in the dim light behind the truck stop in Fredericksburg. Tires thumped in a practiced rhythm. Brake lines checked by touch, then rolling south or east before the sun burned the haze off the ridges. If it was a ranch weekend, he moved in fences and feed. 40-pound sacks slung up into the bed, mineral blocks reset, one cantankerous gate hinge welded back into obedience, then calves pushed out of cedar thickets before dark. He slept where he landed, sometimes in his sleeper cab with a bald hoodie for a pillow, sometimes on a cot in the tack room when storms pinned him down. People called him reliable, like it was a personality. Wade didn't mind. Reliable meant his phone rang when something needed doing and stopped ringing when everybody else gave up. The hill country had taught him that routine was the closest thing to control anyone got. Weather came in sideways over limestone ridges. Creeks stayed dry until they didn't. A trailer tire held pressure for 10,000 miles and then shredded 15 minutes from nowhere. So he measured his life in things he could count. Fuel receipts tucked in a visor clip, miles to empty, calves at dawn and calves at dusk. If the numbers lined up, he slept. His divorce had gone through 3 years earlier without fireworks. He and Lacey weren't enemies, just two people who stopped fitting while pretending they still did. They texted about bills and birthdays and occasionally weather alerts. When she called, he answered. When she needed a dead battery jumped, he drove over and handled it without making a speech. There was no bitterness left, just caution around old fault lines. Old fault. His younger sister Marisol lived in Careville and treated him like a man who'd forget he had a body if she let him. She sent him messages that said things like, eat vegetables that aren't pickled, and if your lower back pops again, you are not 30. Wade replied with thumbs-up emojis and ignored half of it, then did exactly what she said when pain made the choice for him. At the co-op outside Fredericksburg, the morning crew trusted him with the stuff nobody wanted to do. Haul cubes to the east pasture in August heat? Wade. Take the old flatbed up the grade with baling twine threatening mutiny? Wade. Fix whatever was making the North Water Trough scream like a kettle? Wade. He didn't complain because complaining took energy and changed nothing. He liked the quiet of work, the predictable weight of tools in hand, post driver, wire stretcher, fence pliers, air brake hiss, engine rumble, the small comfort of knowing exactly what a machine would do when you asked it right. Human beings were harder. On that Tuesday, his route ran down State Route 16 with a feed trailer and a tight delivery window. Humidity sat low and heavy all afternoon, turning the inside of his shirt damp before he'd even cleared town. By dusk, he'd unloaded at 2 places, signed 3 receipts, and was heading north again with an empty trailer tapping and rattling lightly behind him. Heat lightning flickered somewhere beyond the hills. White sheets in the clouds. No thunder yet. He was just south of a low water crossing he'd driven 100 times when red and blue strobes popped in his mirrors. Wade eased off, checked his shoulder, and rolled to a stop where the road widened near a culvert lined with live oak and mesquite. He put both hands on the wheel out of habit. Patrol lights washed the cab interior in pulses, turning his knuckles pink, then blue, then pink again. Deputy Elena Mora stepped out of the cruiser. Wade knew her by sight. Young but steady, Had that compact posture cops wore when they were trying to look relaxed and ready at once. The county K9 unit sticker glinted on her rear quarter panel. In the back seat, Jax's silhouette shifted behind the kennel grate. Maura came up to his window and tapped twice. Wade rolled it down. Warm night air flowed in, heavy with wet dirt. "Evening, Mr. Sutton," she said, flashlight angled low. "Your right trailer light's out." He glanced in the mirror. Figures, it was working at Medina. "License and insurance, please." He handed them over. "You headed to anything bad?" "Not unless your brake light starts a county-wide emergency." A quick smile. Professional. Tired. As she walked back, Wade looked at the cruiser again. Jax was usually the kind of dog that hit the kennel door the second a stop started, nails scraping, chest forward, all business and adrenaline. Folks around town joked he could smell guilt from another zip code. Tonight he was pressed hard into the back corner like he wanted to crawl through the door panel. Even through 2 layers of glass, Wade could see his ears pinned flat. His mouth was open, but he wasn't panting from heat. He was making a low, drawn-out sound that rolled in his chest and caught every few seconds, almost like he was whining and growling at the same time. Maura opened her driver door halfway and gave a quiet command Wade couldn't hear. Jax did not move. She repeated it sharper. The dog shoved himself tighter into the corner and let out a sound Wade had never heard from a working animal. A high, abrupt yelp that ended in a guttural rumble. Maura shut the door and stood still for a beat too long before returning to Wade's window. She held out his documents and a warning slip. "Get that light fixed tonight if you can." "Yes, ma'am." He hesitated. "Dog okay?" She gave a short laugh that missed her eyes. "Probably heat lightning. He gets weird when pressure drops." She tapped the ticket pad against her thigh once. "You know how animals are." Wade almost said no, actually. He knew how animals were, and that wasn't it. But then he noticed the rest. The cicadas had stopped. Not faded, stopped. 1 second the ditch and trees had been buzzing like power lines, and now the silence was a hard, flat thing pressing against the truck. In the pasture beyond the crossing, a cluster of cattle stood shoulder to shoulder at the far fence, all facing the same direction, heads lifted but not moving. No shifting, no tail flicking, no occasional lowing, just still. Even the breeze felt wrong. It moved in uneven threads, touching his left cheek, then disappearing, then rustling leaves behind him, while the mesquite in front stood dead calm. "You hear that?" he asked. Maura glanced over her shoulder, then back. "Hear what?" "Exactly." For a moment her hand tightened on the radio mic clipped to her vest. Wade watched the tremor in her fingers and knew she felt it too. She keyed the radio anyway, asked dispatch to log her location in a voice a shade too careful, then stepped back. "Drive safe, Mr. Sutton." He pulled away slow, eyes on the mirrors until the strobe lights shrank and disappeared around the bend. The night sound came back in pieces over the next mile. First a single insect trill, then frogs near a stock tank, then the ordinary hum of summer. By the time he reached Medina, he could almost pretend he'd imagined it. Almost. At the truck stop, he parked under sodium lights and found a replacement bulb in the little parts rack near the register. 2 drivers he knew, Mitch from Uvalde, and an older guy everyone called Preacher, though nobody knew if he'd ever seen a pulpit, were posted up at a plastic table with paper cups of bad coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Mitch said as Wade sat down. Got pulled over by Mora near the crossing, Wade said. Jax wouldn't get out of the unit, wouldn't even come to command. Preacher snorted. Dog probably smelled feral hog in the draw. Maybe, Wade said, but everything went quiet, completely. Cattle bunched up like they were waiting on lightning. Or bobcat, Mitch said. Silence means cat half the time. You're tired, man. Wade nodded because it was easier than arguing. Yeah, probably. He went outside, changed the trailer bulb under fluorescent glare, and drove home with the radio off. Every dark culvert felt deeper than usual. Every stand of cedar looked like it could hide something standing just out of sight, watching the road for headlights. Over the next day, he explained it away at least 6 different ways. Pressure shift, predator scent, a rattler in the ditch, Jax stepping on something sharp in the kennel and associating it with that location. Dogs got spooked. Animals did odd things. Everyone knew that. And still, the image stuck. A trained Malinois, refusing open air like the night itself was toxic. That Thursday he took a load he could have sent on the alternate route and kept Route 16 instead. He told himself he needed the shorter drive time. He told himself diesel prices made the decision. He told himself a lot of things. At dusk he crossed the same low-water stretch and saw nothing but oak shadows and reflective fence posts. At full dark he ran it again northbound, this time slowing 2 miles out. Windows cracked. Listening. Normal insect noise. A pair of white-tailed deer flashed in his lights and bounded off. He felt stupid and relieved in equal measure. Then 2 nights later, with heat building under storm clouds and the moon buried, he pulled onto the shoulder on purpose. He killed the engine. The trailer settled with a metallic sigh behind him. He cut his headlights and sat in sudden darkness, eyes adjusting to the pale smear of sky above the ridgeline. He could hear his own pulse in the quiet cab. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then he saw them. Across the culvert, beyond the near fence and under a live oak, 2 amber points appeared. Steady, reflective, wrong. They were too high to be deer, too far apart to be raccoon, and level with a low branch that sat maybe 7 feet off the ground. They didn't bob or blink like animal eyes moving through brush. They held still, fixed on him. Wade reached for the flashlight by his seat and clicked it on, sweeping the beam across the ditch. The points vanished. He held the light there, waiting, mouth dry. A gust came down the draw, carrying the smell of wet stone and something metallic, thin and sharp, like blood on hot steel. The amber points came back 10 feet to the left, as if whatever owned them had moved without crossing the intervening brush. This time they blinked, not down and up like lids closing, but sideways, a quick membrane flick from the outer corners inward. His skin tightened across his shoulders. Nope, he muttered to nobody. He turned the key. The engine cranked once, coughed, then caught. As the dash lights rose, heat lightning flared across the clouds and the world went white for a fraction of a second. In that flash, a shape stood at the fence line. Not clearly enough for detail, but enough for geometry. A long torso angled forward, shoulders sloped and narrow, arms, or forelimbs, whatever they were, hanging too low, with the ends near knee height or lower. It did not stand like a person deciding what to do. It stood like something that had already decided. Darkness slammed back down. Wade jammed the truck into gear and brought the lights up. The fence line was empty. He pulled onto the road and accelerated, heart banging, telling himself he'd seen branches and shadow and storm light, turned into a story by an overtired brain. At 60, he checked the mirror. A movement crossed the pavement behind the trailer, left to right, too fast and too smooth for any cow, deer, or hog he had ever seen. No sound. Just a low gliding lope, and then nothing but black road. Wade drove to Medina without stopping, knuckles white on the wheel, and for the first time in years he left the truck idling in the lot because he didn't trust himself to sit in silence. Inside the store, under bright lights and the smell of fryer grease, normal voices sounded thin and far away. He bought a coffee he didn't want and stood by the window staring at Route 16 as if it might answer him. Out on the shoulder where the highway dropped toward the crossing, a coyote trotted into the wash of parking lot light, froze, and backed away with its tail tucked tight under its belly. It never turned its back to the dark. Wade watched it retreat and knew, with a certainty he could not justify, that something out there was not passing through. It was holding ground. Wade stayed at the window until the coyote disappeared into the dark shoulder grass, and the highway looked empty again. Behind him, somebody laughed at a joke near the coffee station. Ice dropped in a fountain cup. Fryer baskets clanged. Ordinary noises, stubbornly ordinary, and he clung to them for a second like handholds. Then he took out his phone and opened the Notes app. He typed, Route 16 Low Water Crossing, 11:42 p.m. Coyote approached light, froze, backed away, tail tucked, did not turn around. He stared at the words, thumb hovering, then added, Whatever's there is not moving through. It's stationed. He read that line twice and almost deleted it. Instead, he hit save and shoved the phone back in his pocket like it had burned him. He didn't drive straight home. He pulled around to the side of the truck stop, parked under a security floodlight, and got out with a flashlight and a tire thumper. Because if he was going to spook himself stupid, he might as well pretend he was being practical. He checked straps he didn't need to check, kicked tires he had already kicked, and finally crouched by the trailer axle staring at nothing while mosquitoes found his neck. Bear, he thought. Then he answered himself. Not at that height. Big feral dog standing on a culvert bank. Then, not with those eyes set that wide, not without any sound in that brush. Person. That one he tried hardest. Person in dark clothes. Person with a headlamp angled weird. Person messing with drivers for fun. But no person crossed behind his trailer that fast. Back in the cab, he pulled up the county wildlife page and searched by species like he was cramming for an exam. White-tailed deer, axis deer, feral hog, coyote, bobcat, mountain lion. Black bear listed as rare transient. Nothing remotely matched eyes level with lower oak branch. He nearly called Marisol, saw the time, and didn't. She'd hear it in his voice and decide he'd had a breakdown on a weekday. He considered calling Deputy Mora, then remembered the tremor in her hand and didn't do that either. By the time he finally drove north, the sky had started spitting thin rain that never reached full drops, just enough to smear the windshield and make every reflection look like movement. He kept scanning the tree line all the way back to Fredericksburg. At home, he slept in fragments. Every time he dropped off, he snapped awake, convinced he'd heard something brush the side of the house. By 5:30, he gave up, showered, and went to the co-op early just to be around people who talked about feed invoices and busted augers. It didn't help. At 7, while loading mineral bags, he asked one of the older hands, Rudy, as casually as he could, "You ever seen anything odd down by the low water crossing on 16 past Medina?" Rudy kept writing numbers on a clipboard. Odd how? Animal moving wrong. Big. Rudy shrugged. Everything looks big at night if your headlights catch it wrong. Could be a bear. Could be a drunk in a Carhartt jacket. Rudy finally looked up. You okay, Wade? Yeah. Then sleep more. By 8:30, he had asked 3 more people, variations of the same question. Same answers. Cat. Hog. You were tired? You been watching those late-night monster shows? One guy grinned and said, Chupacabra finally moved upscale. Wade laughed with them because not laughing would turn it into a conversation. Around noon, while waiting on a forklift battery swap, he stepped behind the feed warehouse and called the non-emergency sheriff line. He asked if Deputy Mora was on shift. Can I say who's calling? Dispatch asked. Wade Sutton. She stopped me on 16 Tuesday night. Trailer light. There was a pause, keyboard clicks, then, stand by. Mora came on after a minute. Sutton? Yeah, sorry to bother you. You didn't. Her tone was neutral, official. What do you need? He watched a dust devil unwind across the lot while he chose words. You remember your K9 acting off? Another pause, longer. I remember, she said. I was out there again last night. Saw something in the trees. I know how that sounds. Did it approach your vehicle? No. Did you strike anything? No. Any property damage? No. Her voice softened by 1 notch. Then there's nothing actionable. If you see an injured animal or a hazard in roadway, call it in and give mile marker. You believe me at all? She exhaled quietly through her nose, almost a sigh. I believe my dog refused to exit on open door command for the first time in 4 years. I also believe if I file unknown thing in trees, it goes nowhere useful. She lowered her voice. Don't stop there at night, Mr. Sutton. The line clicked off before he could answer. He stood in the heat with the phone against his ear and felt no better. That evening he finished his route early and told himself he was done with it. He even took the long way around town to avoid turning towards 16. At 7:10 p.m., he found himself buying fresh batteries for his handheld spotlight at a hardware store in Medina. Storm prep? The cashier asked. Something like that. He added 2 chem light sticks and a cheap notepad from the front display, like a man preparing for a very boring emergency. Before sunset, he drove past the crossing in full daylight. The place looked insultingly normal. Culvert concrete stained dark near the water line. Live oaks bent over the ditch. Barbed wire fence running both sides of the road, stapled into cedar posts and patched in one section with newer wire. Mesquite beyond that. No footprints visible from the shoulder, just caliche, gravel, and the churn of old tire tracks, where farm trucks cut too close. He pulled off on a ranch turnout a quarter-mile north and walked back with his flashlight even though he didn't need it yet. He checked the fence where he'd seen the shape in lightning, top strand intact. A few tufts of old hair caught on a barb down the line. Could have been deer. Could have been anything. He crouched by the culvert mouth and shined the light into damp concrete shadows. Mud, bottle cap, crushed can, frog eye shine near the water. Nothing. At the tree line, he found a spot where the ground was scuffed, but it was near a game trail and impossible to read. Hoof marks over hoof marks, small prints blurred by drying mud. Whatever had been there had left no clean signature. By the time he got back to his truck, he was angry at himself, at the place, at the way fear made every ordinary detail feel coded. He kicked his front tire harder than necessary and muttered, "Congratulations, Sutton. You scared yourself into field biology." He went home again. Ate, he standing at the counter, turned on the TV for noise and retained none of it. At 10:58 p.m., he was back on Route 16. He told himself this run was about data. That was the word he used while he drove south, with the cab lights dimmed and the notepad on the passenger seat. Data sounded sane. Data sounded like something a grown man did instead of hunting his own panic in the dark. He had the spotlight charged, his phone on dashboard mount with video recording running, and a thermos of coffee already gone lukewarm. He rolled down both windows despite the humidity so he could hear the roadside. 1 mile out, insect noise normal. Half-mile out, still normal though thinner. Quarter-mile out, the sound began to unravel. First the frogs dropped out, then the steady chirr of cicadas frayed into isolated pulses. By the time the culvert signs came into view, the silence had settled again, dense and complete, as if someone had put glass over the landscape. Wade eased onto the shoulder and left the engine idling this time. He kept his foot on the brake and his left hand on the gear shift. He was not, he told himself firmly, making the same mistake of killing all power. He swept the spotlight, once across the near ditch. Grass, fence post, culvert lip. He swept farther, into the trees beyond the far fence. Nothing. He panned back. 2 amber points appeared between 2 mesquite trunks, high and level and fixed on him. His breath stopped so abruptly his chest hurt. He held the beam there, wrists locked. The eyes did not flare and vanish like deer caught broadside. They held the light and returned it with a wet glass sheen. The spacing was too wide, and the height, God, if the ground grade was level there, they sat at least 6.5 feet up. "Okay," he whispered to no one. "Okay, maybe slope, maybe branch, maybe—" The points blinked sideways. A pale film swept across each eye from outer edge inward and back again. His thumb slipped on the spotlight switch and cut the beam for half a second. When it came back, the eyes were gone. He scanned left, right, higher, lower, catching branches and fence wire and nothing living. He swung the light in an arc farther down the fence line. The eyes reappeared 30 feet from where they had been. No crashing brush, no hoof thud, no rattle of wire, just there, as if the dark had moved them whole. Wade's entire body went cold, despite the heat. He jammed the truck into drive, kept the beam trained 1 more second, and saw the points tilt, just slightly, as if whatever carried them had cocked its head in curiosity. Then he drove. Not fast at first. Controlled. 25, 30, then 40 as distance opened. He told himself to breathe in counts, like Marisol had taught him after his divorce, when panic attacks started showing up for no reason in grocery aisles. In for 4, out for 6. At the Medina truck stop, he rolled straight through the lot without parking, looped around under bright lights, and only then realized he was shaking hard enough to miss a gear. He pulled into a space, put the truck in neutral, and hit stop on the phone recording. His hands trembled through playback. The video showed dashboard glare, bug splats, his breathing loud in the mic. At minute 12, the spotlight sweep landed on 2 distant glints. They looked like pinholes, not height, not spacing, no context. Could have been a reflector tack. "Great," he said aloud. "Perfect. Proof of absolutely nothing." He rewound and watched again anyway. On his notepad, he wrote with block letters pressed so hard The pen nearly tore paper. 10:58 p.m. Depart Fredericksburg. 11:31 p.m. Arrival. Crossing Sound Drop. Complete approximately 11:33 eyes. Visible 2 times height. Estimated greater than 6 feet from grade blink lateral membrane movement between positions. Silent/instant. He stared at the phrase lateral membrane and hated himself a little. He had become the kind of man who documented monster eyes and bullet points. When he finally slept just before dawn, he dreamed of looking into his side mirror and seeing amber points centered in the lane behind him, matching his speed exactly. The next day he did what frightened people do when they can't stop thinking about one thing. He overcorrected into routine. He ran feed deliveries, checked 2 leaking trough valves, and helped string new wire on a south pasture line until his shoulders burned. He made jokes when people joked. He even called Lacey to ask about a tax document and kept his voice flat enough she didn't ask questions. But around sunset, while coiling hose behind the barn, he caught himself staring toward the west ridge, where storm clouds were stacking and counting how long the thunder took to arrive. That night he lasted until 9:40 before turning his truck toward Route 16 again. He told himself this time was final. 1 clean pass at highway speed. No stopping, no shoulder theatrics. If he saw nothing, he'd call it stress and walk away. He believed that plan for nearly 20 minutes. At 10:17, he was parked on a gravel farm entrance 50 yards north of the crossing. Lights off, both hands on the wheel, waiting for heat lightning to outline the tree line. The silence came first again, a warning he now recognized with visceral certainty. It rolled in like pressure in the ears before a storm. Wade clicked his hazards on, then off. He had no reason to do it. He just needed to see something obey a switch. Lightning flickered far off, turning clouds the color of old bone for an instant, then darkness reset. He scanned the fence line with naked eyes. Nothing. Another flicker, closer now. In that brief, flat light, the oaks became cutouts, black against white sky. Something stood between them. Too dark for detail, but unmistakably upright and too large. It was inside the far pasture, just beyond the fence, maybe 80 yards out. Shoulders sloped forward, torso long. Forelimbs hanging low enough that the ends, hands, paws, whatever, sat near the top strand of barbed wire without reaching. Lightning died. The shape vanished back into black. Wade did not move. He was suddenly aware of every sound in his cab. Fan motor whir, turn signal relay clicking though it wasn't on, the tiny tick of cooling metal from somewhere under the dash. Another sheet of lightning spread across the horizon. The silhouette was closer. He saw it now against a gap in the oaks. Head narrow, neck thick, back descending in a line that looked more like a sprinter bent at the blocks than any quadruped posture. It was not standing still. It had shifted forward without any transition he could track. Person, Wade said out loud, voice tight. It's a person, gear on, backpack, maybe. The thing moved, not a run, not a bound. A smooth, gliding lope that covered ground in long pulls, shoulder and hip working out of phase in a way his brain rejected on sight. It crossed to the fence, rose slightly, and seemed to pass through the top line without a climb or jump, as if it knew exactly where every strand sat in the dark and wasted no motion on caution. Wade slapped his headlights on full beam. Empty pasture. He swung the beams left and right. Mesquite trunks flashed white. Fence staples glittered. Grass bent in uneven patches where wind touched it. No body, no eyes, no movement bigger than moths. He listened for retreat, brush crash, hoofbeat, anything. Nothing. Then, from somewhere off his passenger side near the ditch, came one dry click. Then another layered beneath it, almost like two rocks tapped together inside a pipe. Wade jammed the truck into reverse too hard, tires spitting gravel, then dropped into drive and shot back onto the road pointed north. His trailer fish-tailed once before straightening. He did not look in mirrors for a full mile. At a pull-off near a closed fruit stand, he finally stopped and forced himself to check behind him. Empty lane. Empty shoulder. Wind pushing cedar tops back and forth like dark water. He sat there with both forearms on the wheel and tried to reason his own senses into submission. Heat lightning distorts depth. Fatigue warps motion. Your eyes fill missing frames. Somebody in the pasture. Ranch hand, hunter, trespasser. You startled him. He moved, you panicked. Stormlight did the rest. He repeated versions of that until the words turned to noise. When he got home, he left his boots by the door and stood in the kitchen sink light, looking at his reflection in the window glass. Behind his own face, the dark yard gave nothing back. He took out the notepad and wrote anyway. 10:17 p.m. parked north entrance, silence onset, immediate before visual lightning silhouette. Upright, large, sloped shoulders, long forelimbs. Second flash. Distance closed, significantly movement equals smooth lope. Abnormal gate crossed / cleared fence line with no visible pause, possible auditory clicks. 2. Near passenger ditch. He capped the pen and kept staring at the page. At the bottom he added one final line, smaller than the rest. Could still be a person. Could still be stress. He said that sentence out loud once, like an oath. Then he turned every exterior light on around the house and slept on the couch. It was like with the TV running. Trying not to dream about a shape that moved like it already understood exactly how fast fear traveled. He didn't stop for almost 4 miles. When he finally pulled onto a gravel turnout, Wade kept the engine running, doors locked, and dictated notes into his phone in a voice he barely recognized. Timestamp, lightning interval, shoulder height, forelimb length, lateral blink, fence clearance, layered clicking from the passenger side ditch. Then he typed the same points into his field log, so he couldn't later tell himself he'd imagined them. He drove home scanning mirrors every few seconds, lights on high, jaw clenched, and left the TV glowing while he sat on the couch in his work clothes until exhaustion took him. He woke at 2:13 a.m. to the sound of something tapping glass. Wade came upright on the couch, blanket pooled at his waist, heart already sprinting before he was fully conscious. The TV had gone to a screensaver, blue light pulsing over the room, and the tapping came again, softer this time. From the back of the house near the kitchen window. Tick, tick, tick. Tree branch, he told himself, though there wasn't a tree close enough to touch that pain. He sat still and listened until his ears rang. The sound didn't repeat. Outside the yard lights he'd left blazing painted hard white triangles across packed dirt and cedar fence. Nothing moved in them. When dawn finally pushed gray into the sky, he went out anyway. His truck sat where he'd left it, dust filmed over hood and windshield. On the passenger side, just above the door handle, 4 faint streaks ran downward through the dust. 2 narrow for a palm swipe, 2 parallel for random drip marks. Not deep enough for a claw gouge. Just clean tracks where something had pressed and slid. Wade rubbed one with his thumb. The metal underneath felt cool and damp from condensation. He looked over the roof to the other side. There were matching streaks on the driver door. He stood there too long, one hand still on the panel, and felt that same pressure from the crossing settle under his ribs. By 7, he was at the co-op, moving on habit and almost no sleep. He loaded cubes, signed slips, nodded at jokes he didn't hear. At noon, he dug the old handheld Spotlight out of his cab again and swapped in fresh batteries. At 3, he told himself he was done chasing shadows. At 6:50, clouds stacked over the hills, and he turned south on Route 16. He didn't stop right at the crossing this time. He parked 50 yards short off the shoulder where gravel met a narrow strip of crabgrass and cut the engine with the truck angled for a fast pullout. The air held that wet electric taste before storm break. Insects still buzzed, thin but present. He waited with both hands around the Spotlight grip, counting breaths. No eyes, no movement. He scanned slowly from culvert to fence line, from fence line to tree trunks, then back again. Wind pushed mesquite branches in short jerks. A nightbird gave one clipped call and went quiet. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. He almost laughed at himself. He almost started the truck and left. Then the silence dropped like a gate. The buzz of insects didn't taper, it sheared off. Grass stilled. Even his own truck seemed to hush. The metal ticks from cooling engine fading into a dead stillness that felt manufactured. Wade thumbed the Spotlight on and swept right. The beam caught the far fence. Something was already there. Not eyes first this time, not a silhouette enlightening. A side profile, clean and immediate, as if it had stepped into a stage light and held. A narrow snout tapered out from a blunt brow. Fur, coarse, dark, uneven, ran in matted ridges along the spine like wet hair clumped by mud. The shoulders were wrong. Too forward, too sloped. Built for pulling weight low. One forelimb rested on the top strand of barbed wire. Not a paw, a hand. Long, jointed fingers curled over the wire with an almost lazy grip. He could see separate digits. Knuckles. A thumb set lower than the others. No flinch from the barbs digging in. Wade forgot to breathe. The beam trembled in his grip, slid up, and the head turned with a fast, bird-like snap. Too quick, too precise. Pale inner eyelids flicked sideways over amber eyes, then cleared. The snout parted slightly, showing teeth that weren't all one type. Long canines set among flatter grinding shapes farther back. The smell hit a second later through his open window. Wet limestone. Rust. Old blood. Baked on metal. His body reacted before his mind did. His right foot stomped for a brake that was already down. His left hand clawed for the key, though the truck was off. He made a short, raw sound that might have been Jesus and might have been nothing at all. The creature shifted weight. Wire sang softly under its hand. Wade's thumb slipped, and the Spotlight beam skated off into brush. In that half-second of dark, he heard 2 clicks, layered and close, like someone tapping bone together. He snapped the light back. The fence was empty. Not running away empty, not just ducked empty. Empty as if what he'd seen had been cut out of the frame. His throat tightened so hard he gagged. He jammed the key into ignition, ground it once, caught the engine, and threw the truck into drive. Gravel sprayed as he lunged onto the highway. In the side mirror, for one strobing second of distant lightning, he thought he saw something pacing the ditch line, parallel to him, low and smooth, then swallowed by cedar shadow. He drove north with the Spotlight still clenched in his left hand and realized 3 miles later his fingers were numb At a gas station outside town, under hard canopy lights, he parked crooked and stepped out on shaking legs. He bent double between pump islands and dry heaved until bile burned his throat. When he could stand straight again, he scrubbed both hands over his face and told himself in a flat, mechanical tone, "You saw it. You saw enough. It is real, and it is not anything on a wildlife poster." His phone buzzed in his pocket. "Lacey. You up? Storm coming through. Bring your truck in if hail starts." Wade stared at the text until the screen dimmed. Then he typed back, "Yeah, I'm up." He did not say where. He got home just before midnight and left the porch lights on, yard lights on, barn light on, kitchen light on. The house looked like an overlit stage set in the middle of dark pasture. He locked the door, checked it twice, and set the spotlight on the counter next to his keys. At 12:41 a.m., the motion light by his driveway clicked on. Wade froze halfway to the couch. He waited for the expected trigger. A feral cat, a possum, wind-blown branch. Nothing crossed the window. After 30 seconds, the light clicked off. At 12:44, the side yard motion light came on. Then the back. One by one, not all at once. A slow sequence around the house, as if something were circling just outside each sensor's throw and stepping in only long enough to trip it. Wade grabbed the shotgun he kept for snakes and opportunistic coyotes and moved to the hallway window, keeping back from the glass. He saw fence, dirt, the old water trough, pale glare, then shadow. No body. The backlight clicked off. His phone rang hard in his hand, making him jump so badly he nearly dropped the gun. "Unknown number?" He answered on instinct. "Yeah?" Static hissed for 2 seconds. Then, faintly, like it came from far down a pipe, he heard a dry double click. The line went dead. Wade stared at the screen. No caller ID. He told himself somebody was screwing with him. Teenagers with a scanner and too much time. Ranch kids daring each other. Someone had seen him parked by the crossing and decided to have fun. He wanted to believe that so badly his chest hurt. He slept maybe 40 minutes total, shotgun across his lap, lights burning until dawn washed them out. In the morning, he went straight to his truck, needing the ordinary ritual of work more than food. The passenger door was unlocked. He knew he had locked it. Inside, the cab looked untouched at first glance. Clipboard where he'd left it. Thermos and cup holder. Logbook on dash. Then he saw the notepad. He had left it on the passenger seat folded under a map. Now it sat open on the console, turned to the page from last night. The lines about silhouette and clicks were still there. Across them, pressed into the paper in muddy smears, were 4 narrow marks, descending diagonally, like fingers dragged slowly from top left to bottom right. His spotlight was gone. Wade backed out of the cab so fast he banged his shoulder on the door frame. He checked under seats, sleeper storage, side boxes, bed of the ranch pickup. Nothing. At the edge of his driveway, hooked over the top strand of his fence, hung the spotlight by its wrist strap. Battery door open. Bulb cracked. Lens webbed in a spider of impact fractures. He stood in full daylight with sun on his neck and felt, unmistakably, that he was being watched from somewhere just beyond what he could immediately scan. Not hunted in the abstract. Chosen. His phone shook in his grip when he called the sheriff line. "Any signs of forced entry?" dispatch asked. "Truck was unlocked. I lock it every night." "Could you have forgotten?" "No." "Any property stolen of high value?" "It took my light and put it on my fence." A pause. Keyboard clatter. "Sir, if this is vandalism, you can file online. If you feel threatened right now, I can send a deputy when available." When available came out like Not now. He hung up and called Deputy Mora directly. She answered on the third ring, voice tight with road noise. Mora. It's Sutton. A beat. What happened? He told her in clipped pieces, lights tripping in sequence, no caller static, truck unlocked, notepad moved, spotlight relocated and broken. She didn't laugh, didn't tell him to sleep more. Stay online, she said. I'm 30 minutes out on another call. I can swing by after. By then it'll be gone. Maybe, maybe not. Another beat. Did you touch the light? Yeah. Okay, doesn't matter much now. Listen to me, keep your doors locked. Do not go out tonight and do not return to that crossing after dark. Too late on that last one. I know, she said quietly. When she arrived, she walked the fence and yard with gloves on, expression unreadable. She photographed the broken spotlight and the marks on the notepad, then stood at his truck door and stared at the handle for a long time. Any paw prints? Wade asked. Too dry, too much old traffic. She straightened. I can request a game warden consult, but if there's nothing clean to cast, this day's a weird trespass report. She glanced toward the tree line bordering his back property. You have anywhere else you can stay for a couple nights? Could go to my sister's. Do that. He almost agreed. He should have. Instead, he said, I've got deliveries. Mora gave him a look halfway between frustration and recognition. Being stubborn isn't a safety plan, Mr. Sutton. He wanted to tell her stubborn was the only plan he had left. By late afternoon, thunder rolled closer and jobs piled anyway. Emergency feed run to a ranch south of Medina after a gate failure dumped half their cubes in mud. Then a second pickup from a supplier that would close by 8. Everybody else was short-handed or already out on storm prep. Wade told the co-op manager he needed someone riding shotgun. Manager spread both hands. Nobody available. Take 290 around, the manager offered. Adds an hour and change. Then add it. Wade checked weather radar. A red band of cells was pushing over 290 hail signatures, lighting up yellow and purple. Dot alert pinged 10 minutes later. Temporary closure eastbound at Low Bridge due debris. He stared at the map until routes blurred. North to Kerrville and around? Flood watch in effect and 2 low-water crossings already flagged. Wait until morning? Feed ranch had cattle, stacked without supplement and a crew, depending on him tonight. He called Marisol while loading. You home? Yeah. Why do you sound like that? Didn't sleep. That is not what I asked. He looked across the lot at rain darkening the pavement in scattered drops. Can I maybe crash there later? Of course. Come now. Can't. One run first. Wade, I'll call when I'm headed your way. He hung up before she could argue. By 8:27 p.m., full dark had settled under storm clouds, turning every headlight reflection into glare. Wade eased his rig onto Route 16 with wipers ticking and jaw clenched so hard it ached. He tried Mora once. No answer. Tried again 5 minutes later. Voicemail. At mile marker 12, his CB crackled with fragments from other drivers rerouting around weather. Normal chatter, familiar. For a few miles, he almost believed he could thread this and be done. Then, as he dropped toward the low-water crossing, the radio hissed and went flat silent mid-sentence. Not dead, just open channel with no static, no voices, no road noise bleed. A vacuum. His skin went cold. He reached for his phone and called Mora a third time. This time she picked up immediately, breath quick, like she was moving. Sutton, where are you? 2 miles north of the crossing. I have to go through. Stop where you are. Can't safely stop on this grade with a loaded trailer. Then keep moving and listen. I'm coming up from southbound side. Backup is 20 out. Her voice sharpened. Do not exit your cab for any reason. Rain thickened, drumming the windshield. Wade clicked on every auxiliary light he had. High beams, roof markers, ditch lights, flooding the lane ahead in white. The silence outside deepened anyway. No insects, no frogs, no cattle sounds from the pastures he passed. Just wipers and engine and his own breathing. As the crossing sign flashed by, something struck the trailer once from the right side. A heavy, hollow bang that shuddered through the frame. Wade flinched and fought the wheel. Another hit, farther back. He looked in the mirror and saw only rain and side marker glow. Maura's voice snapped through the phone speaker. I've got your lights, half-mile out. Keep center line. From ahead, beyond the rain sheet, he saw the faint pulse of red and blue emerging around a bend on the far side of the crossing. Behind him, close now and running in the dark beside the trailer, came a sound he recognized from his nightmare and from no natural thing he had ever heard in Texas brush. A layered, dry clicking, pacing his speed. Wade tightened both hands on the wheel until his knuckles flashed white. Road ahead narrowing, storm behind. Weight of feed at his back, and something matching him in the ditch where he couldn't quite see it. He understood with sudden brutal clarity that every route he had left ran straight through that crossing. There was no detour anymore. There was no detour anymore. Wade held the wheel at 10 and 2 and kept the rig dead center, eyes bouncing between windshield and mirrors, mirrors and windshield. Rain striped the glass in diagonal threads. The loaded trailer tugged and steadied, tugged and steadied. The clicking in the ditch kept pace. Stay with me, Deputy Maura said through his phone, clipped to the dash mount. Her breathing was in his ear. I'm at the south shoulder now. I can see your markers. Keep coming. Don't stop in the crossing. A wash of red and blue strobes flared ahead, smeared by rain into bleeding color. He saw her cruiser angled partly off the lane, nose northbound. Takedowns dark for now. For one irrational second he felt relief, hard enough to make him dizzy. Then something big struck the trailer's rear quarter from the right. The trailer snapped half a foot left. Wade corrected, felt the load shove back, corrected again. Contact, he barked into the phone. I heard it. Keep moving. The road dipped toward the low-water concrete. Guardrail on both sides. Culvert mouth black and wide. Another impact, closer to his cab this time, like a battering ram wrapped in fur. His right mirror showed only rain in a blurred shape too low and too fast to resolve. He hit the air horn once. The blast shook through the cab and out into the night. The clicking stopped. For half a second there was only rain, wipers, engine. Then the creature stepped into his high beams on the center line. It did not appear from brush. It was simply there, one stride into the lane, shoulders squared to the truck, head lowered as if listening to him from inside the light. Wade's brain tried to divide it into familiar parts and failed. Its chest rose to the hood line of his rig, rib cage visible beneath patchy fur and skin stretched too tight over moving muscle. Dark hair clumped wet along the spine and shoulders, but the underlayer looked almost hairless in places. Gray-brown hide shining with rain. The torso was too long for a man and too upright for a wolf, built like something assembled by memory from several species, and then forced to work anyway. Forelimbs hung low and ended in hands, no question now. 5 long fingers with dark nails thick as horn, wrists flexing inward and outward with unsettling dexterity. Hind legs were digitigrade, heel lifted, joint angles wrong for human gait. It shifted weight with predatory economy, every movement deliberate and quiet despite its size. Its face was the worst part because it refused to settle into one category. The jawline pushed forward in a canine taper, yes, but the cheek structure above it looked disturbingly human in contour. Planes of bone where no canine should have those planes. Ears lay flattened to the skull, which rose into ridged knobs like knuckles under skin. Rain ran down its muzzle and dripped from whisker pits. When it blinked, pale inner lids swept sideways over irises the color of old amber. Its mouth opened. Not a roar. Not a bark. A layered clicking howl spilled out. Dry clacks stacked under a long, vibrating note that felt less like sound and more like pressure behind Wade's eyes. Behind him, from Mora's cruiser, Jax answered with a scream. Not a bark. Not a warning growl. A full-throated, panicked scream that cracked at the end, followed by the violent slam of a dog body hitting kennel metal again and again. Wade did not think through options. Trucking instinct took over before panic could lock his limbs. He dropped a gear, stood on the air horn, and rolled forward just enough to force decision. His or the creature's. He did not aim to hit center mass. Hitting something that size at this speed with a loaded trailer on wet concrete could roll him, jackknife him uncontrolled, pin him in this valley of guardrails with nowhere to go. The creature held for one impossible second, eyes fixed on his windshield. Then it moved, sidestep, almost elegant, clearing his direct line by inches, one hand slapping his passenger fender with a metallic bang that shivered through the cab. Wade steered left, hard, and yanked trailer brakes in a practice sequence he had only ever used on training lots and one ice road in Oklahoma. The trailer swung. Tires shrieked. The rig folded into an intentional jackknife across both lanes, tractor nose toward the north rail, trailer blocking southbound entirely. He killed forward motion, set parking brake, and slapped every work light switch he had. White floods exploded from the tractor sides and trailer rails, turning rain into silver needles and washing the crossing in brutal light. Guardrails flashed. Wet asphalt gleamed. Nothing had shadow to hide in. "Block set," he shouted into the phone. "Block set." Mora was already moving. Her cruiser reversed 15 yards, then angled so takedowns and strobes hit broadside across his lights, creating a blinding crisscross of white and blue. "Stay in your cab," she yelled through her PA, voice distorted and huge. The creature came at him anyway. It hit the passenger door with shoulder-first force that bowed metal and shattered the side window inward in a burst of safety glass. Wade threw his arm up, felt stinging cuts along forearm and cheek. A hand, not paw, hand, slid through the broken frame, fingers searching, nails scraping the seat back where his shoulder had been half a second earlier. He had one tool within reach besides 40,000 pounds of truck. Bear spray canister from his door pocket, bought for feral dogs at remote drops, and never once used. He ripped the safety tab with his teeth, jammed the nozzle toward the arm in the window gap, and emptied a burning orange stream point blank. Chemical cloud bloomed in the rain, atomized and blown partly back into the cab. Wade coughed hard as capsaicin hit his own throat and eyes. Outside, the creature jerked away with startling speed, issuing a rapid burst of dry clicks, and a high, choked howl that warbled between frequencies like two throats sounding at once. Jack slammed against the cruiser door again and screamed. Mora's voice cut through. Back up! Back up! Back up now! I'm pinned! Then stay put and keep lights on it! The creature reared half upright in the chemical mist, one forearm across its face, fingers clawing at its own eyes. Even blinded, it oriented toward movement, toward Mora's cruiser lights, head snapping with that same bird-like precision. She hit another switch. Her rear strobes shifted to rapid pattern, white, blue, in punishing bursts. The creature recoiled as if struck. Backup sirens finally rose in the distance, faint, then growing. Doppler weaving over rain. The creature dropped to all fours and launched. One bound put it on the guardrail. Another cleared it entirely, her body folding and extending with impossible spring. It vanished into cedar and mesquite down the draw with no crash, no prolonged rustle, just one heavy landing thud and then dark. The crossing held only rain and light, and the hiss of his own cooling brakes. Wade realized he had stopped breathing and sucked air that tasted like pepper and blood. "Do not move," Mora said, voice shaking now that immediate action was over. "Do not move, Sutton. Units are inbound. Do not move." He tried to answer and gagged instead. By the time the first deputy truck arrived, his fingers had cramped into claws around the wheel. He had to pry them open one by one with his other hand. His whole body shook in violent, involuntary bursts that made his teeth chatter despite the heat. When he finally got his door open, his knees buckled on the wet asphalt. He made it 3 steps behind the trailer and vomited until there was nothing left. EMS parked nose to nose with a patrol SUV, red lights smearing the rain. Someone draped a blanket over Wade's shoulders even though he kept saying he was hot. A paramedic with a buzz cut and calm eyes cleaned glass cuts from his forearm and cheek, while asking simple questions meant to check orientation. Name? Wade Sutton. Date? He got it right on second try. Did you hit your head? No. Any loss of consciousness? No. Any trouble breathing besides spray exposure? He coughed once, nodded no, then leaned over and dry heaved again. Across the crossing, Mora sat on the curb beside her cruiser, vest half unzipped, elbows on knees, shaking so hard her radio mic bounced against her chest. 2 deputies stood near her, one talking low, the other watching the tree line with a rifle at low ready. Jax was still in the back of the cruiser. Rear door open, kennel gate open, dog unmoving in the far corner, pressed against the metal like he could flatten through it. Foam flecked his muzzle. He growled if anyone came within reach, then whined, then gave short, sharp barks that sounded like panic hiccups. A K-9 handler from the neighboring county arrived 20 minutes later, knelt outside the cruiser and tried commands in a steady voice. Jax ignored everyone. Not refusal in anger, refusal in terror. Ears pinned, eyes huge, body trembling. "He won't exit," the handler said quietly to Mora. Mora laughed once, a broken sound. "I know." It took nearly 40 minutes before Jax would put one paw on asphalt, and even then he scrambled back in after 2 seconds, nails scrambling on the door sill. Game wardens arrived with lights and plaster kits, but rain had already flattened whatever clean evidence might have existed. They found disturbed mud by the guardrail and a few deep impressions that could not be cast before water filled them. One warden held his flashlight over a mark, frowned and said, "Could be overlap. Could be washout. Nothing I'd testify to. No blood trail, no hair snagged where they expected, no clear track line into the cedar draw, despite 6 search passes. By 3 a.m., the official language had begun hardening around uncertainty. Unidentified large animal. Aggressive approach to vehicles. No confirmed species. At 4:10, they escorted Wade and Maura separately to the substation in Kerr County for statements. The fluorescent-lit interview room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Wade sat with a paper cup in both hands, because if he let go, they shook. A lieutenant with reading glasses flipped open a form and clicked his pen. Start from your first contact tonight. Wade started from mile marker 12. He did not mention sideways eyelids at first. He did not mention hands. He made it halfway through and stopped. Mr. Sutton, the lieutenant said gently, take your time. Wade looked at the tabletop and heard himself say, it had fingers. The lieutenant's pen paused a fraction of a second, then resumed. Describe appendages as best you can. Hands, long. Could grip. It reached through my window. He expected ridicule. He got bureaucratic neutrality instead, which felt worse. Near dawn, after formal statements were done, Maura stood by the vending machine, rubbing capsaicin cream from one wrist where overspray had caught her. Her eyes were bloodshot, hair damp around her temples. I gave him open door command 3 times, she said without greeting, then emergency deploy once when it hit your truck. He did not obey. In 4 years, he has never... She cut herself off and swallowed. Never. Wade nodded. His throat hurt too much for more. She looked past him toward nothing. I keep hearing that sound. The clicking? And the way he screamed. She meant Jack's. They stood in silence until a captain stepped out of an office and called them both in. The captain shut the door, sat, and folded his hands on a legal pad. Here's where we are, he said. You both made consistent statements about an unidentified large animal. Good. Keep it there. Do not post speculation online. Do not give interviews. If asked, you encountered a predator of unknown type during a weather event. Maura stiffened. With respect, sir, it wasn't... He lifted one hand. I know what you said you saw, Deputy. I also know what we can prove. He turned to Wade. Game Warden has no matchable tracks. Rain destroyed most sign. We have vehicle damage, glass, chemical deployment, and 2 witnesses under stress. That is enough for an incident file, not enough for the internet circus. Wade gave a brittle laugh. Internet circus already exists. They'll call it Wolfman by lunch. The captain did not smile. Let them joke. Better than people showing up at that crossing with rifles and GoPros. He slid 2 copies of preliminary report language across the desk. Both used the same phrase. Unidentified large animal displaying atypical behavior. Wade read it, signed where indicated, and felt something close to shame for being relieved by vagueness. Afterward, in the parking lot, dawn turning the sky chalk gray, he sat in his truck and recorded a voice memo on his phone. Not for report, for himself. He described everything he had left out or softened. Sideways blink, human-like hands, mixed dentition, the sound that crawled under his skin, Jack's screaming like a person. He spoke until his voice went hoarse. At the end he said, if I ever tell myself this didn't happen, play this back. He saved it to a locked folder and never posted it anywhere. He did not drive Route 16 after dark again. The first week after the crossing, he tried to continue normal long-haul schedules and failed in plain practical ways. Twice he missed exits because he was scanning tree lines instead of signs. Once he woke in a truck stop lot, convinced something had struck his trailer, and found nothing but wind. He started arriving to dispatch with eyes ringed purple from 2-hour sleep blocks and too much caffeine. At the co-op office, his manager, Dale, tapped a route sheet and said, "Houston turnaround Monday overnight." Wade stared at the paper, then at the wall map, where red marker lines traced his old life across counties. "I can't do overnights right now." Dale leaned back. "Can't or don't want to." Wade thought about lying. Instead, he said, "Can't." Dale studied him, then sighed. "What can you do?" "Regional, daylight. I'll take more loading and yard work to make up." For a month, Dale patched it together out of respect and staffing desperation. Wade ran shorter loops, home by dusk when possible. He kept telling himself it was temporary. Then, one hot afternoon in August, after a morning delivery near Comfort, he drove his sleeper rig to a used equipment lot outside Fredericksburg and parked in front of a sign that read, "We buy fleet trucks." The buyer, a barrel-chested man named Kevin, circled the rig, checked mileage, asked routine questions. "You sure you want to let this one go?" Kevin said. "Good sleeper setup. Hard to replace." Wade looked at the bunk curtains, the little fan clipped by the berth, the microwave strapped behind the seats. Small signs of a man who lived on highways half his life. "Yeah," he said, "I'm sure." When Kevin named a fair number, Wade didn't haggle much. He signed transfer papers with a hand that steadied only after the second signature. He used part of the payout to buy a cheaper day cab and clear a chunk of debt. The rest sat in savings like a buffer against nights he still didn't trust. By October, he quit long haul entirely and moved full-time into ranch logistics, feed ordering, daylight deliveries between 2 neighboring operations, fence and water schedule coordination. Less money some months, fewer miles always. And a hard rule he told everyone up front. "I do not run Route 16 after sunset, don't ask." People asked anyway. He refused anyway. At home, he turned security into ritual. Motion lights at every corner, 2 trail cameras on the driveway and 1 by the back fence, reinforced latch plates on doors. He replaced flimsy kennel panels on the side yard with welded steel runs and heavier gates, despite not owning a dog. Marisol noticed on her first visit after the incident. She stood by the new kennel doors, eyebrows raised. "You planning to adopt wolves now?" Wade tried a smile. "Just upgrading." "You don't even have a Labrador." "I know." She touched his sleeve, reading what he didn't say. "Okay." Lacey's reaction took longer to shift. At first, she treated the whole thing like acute stress. "You've been running yourself into the ground for years," she said over coffee at her kitchen table. "You finally hit a wall and your brain made it dramatic." Wade didn't argue. He didn't have language that wouldn't sound insane. 2 weeks later, she called at 1:17 a.m. because he had sleep called her. Accidental dial during a night terror. She drove over and found him on his living room floor, back against the couch, breathing hard, shotgun unloaded beside him because Marisol had insisted he stop sleeping armed. The TV glowed blue. All house lights were on. He looked up as she entered and said, disoriented, "Don't open the door." Her expression changed then. Not belief in monsters, belief in damage. After that, she stopped saying dramatic. She started saying, "Yet, did you sleep? And do you want me to sit on the phone while you drive home?" Marisol became the anchor exactly as predicted. She called nightly for months, no matter how late. "Check in," she'd say. "Alive," he'd answer. "Food?" "Mostly. Therapy? Working on it." She found him a trauma counselor in San Antonio who handled first responders and accident survivors. On the day of his first appointment, Wade sat in the parking garage, gripping the steering wheel so hard his wrist cramped. Marisol, in the passenger seat, waited him out without pushing. "You can hate this," she said. "Just go inside and hate it there." He laughed once, shaky, and went in. Counseling didn't erase anything. It gave him scaffolding. Breathing drills that actually slowed his pulse, grounding routines when the silence memory hit, language for hypervigilance that made him feel less broken and more injured. Not everyone gave grace. At feedlots and supply counters, co-workers started calling him Wolfman within days of rumors leaking. "Hey Sutton, seen your boyfriend on 16 lately? Better carry silver bullets, man." He learned to laugh on cue, smile, shrug, move pallets. If he corrected details, people leaned in for entertainment. If he gave them nothing, they got bored faster. So publicly, he reduced it to one sentence. Saw a big predator nobody could identify. Privately, he kept the full truth in locked notes and in sessions twice a month. Present day, Wade's truck is a dusty single-axle day cab with feed dust baked into the floor mats and a clipboard mount where the old long-haul GPS used to be. He manages feed logistics for 2 ranches west of Fredericksburg, starts before sunup, and is usually parked by supper. On a clear Tuesday in March, he drives Route 16 at 11:20 a.m. because the South Ranch needs cubes and daylight is bright enough to flatten shadows. Windows up, radio off. He tells himself the radio is off so he can listen for mechanical changes in the truck. The truth is, he still can't stand unexpected static on that stretch. As he nears the low water crossing, his shoulders climb toward his ears without permission. He forces them down, checks mirrors, scans fence lines, oak, mesquite, culvert, guardrail. Cattle graze on the far rise, unconcerned. A ranch intern riding with him, 19 and chatty, notices his silence. "You okay, Wade?" "Yep." "You always go quiet here?" He keeps his eyes on the road. "Just pay attention through this dip. Water can slick it even when it looks dry." They cross without incident. He exhales only when the mile marker passes in his mirror. At the South Ranch, he unloads, signs slips, jokes with the foreman, and nobody would guess his pulse only recently settled. Night routine is strict now. Dinner by 7 if possible. Check cameras. Walk perimeter once before dark fully sets in. Doors locked in sequence he can recite. Journal on the kitchen table. In that journal he logs weather, livestock anomalies, predator sightings, anything unusual. 2 coyotes seen near West Fence, 5:42 a.m. Owl strike on coop roof, 9:10 p.m. Camera 3 triggered by windblown tarp. Most entries are boring, that's the point. Writing it down keeps his mind from stitching random noises into threat patterns. Twice a month he drives to San Antonio for counseling. Sometimes they talk about the crossing directly. Sometimes they talk about how trauma narrows life and how routine can be both medicine and cage. He still has the voice memo from Dawn after the incident. Still locked. Still unshared. Every so often, usually after a storm, someone new at the co-op asks if the Route 16 story is true. Wade gives his public line. "We encountered a predator no one could identify, that's all." If they push, he says he has work to do and leaves it there. At home, alone, with the house quiet and light steady, he allows the private version to stand without arguing with it. Jax knew before any human did. A trained K9, all discipline and drive, refused open air, because whatever waited by that crossing was not just dangerous, it was aware. Aware of roads, of lights, of vehicles slowing at the culvert. aware enough to circle a house and move a notepad, aware enough to test fear and recognize it. Wade doesn't need anyone else to believe that for it to be true in his life. He survived because he reacted like a trucker under load. Hands before panic, procedure before imagination. He survived because Maura kept moving under pressure. He survived because bright light and chemistry, bought seconds and seconds, were enough. That has to be enough. By 9 each night, he turns off the kitchen light, checks the lock once, and goes to bed with a fan running for white noise. When thunder rolls over the hills, he still wakes sometimes with his heart hammering, listening for clicks that aren't there. Then he breathes in for 4, out for 6, and reminds himself where he is. Home. Daylight comes. And tomorrow's route, by design, ends before dark.